Today is our first episode of NBA Prospects. We are diving into Buzelis of the G League. How would he fit with the Pistons? What's his strengths? What's his weaknesses? We're going to talk about all that in today's episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast.
You are Locked On Pistons, your daily Detroit Pistons podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's the deal? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast. Per usual, I am your host, Kuka Hill. You can find me over on Twitter at Kuka Hill. I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We're free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. So today we are diving into our first prospect episode. Last summer was actually 2 summers ago, was our first summer on the podcast, really diving into prospects, doing some scouting. I believe that 2 years ago was the Jay and Ivy draft with Apollo and all that. Then last year, obviously, was the Amen, Wemby, all that. And the Pistons are at 5 again. So this is 3 straight years they're at 5. So we're going to be looking at a lot of prospects, just like we did the last 2 years. When the Pistons had number 1, we didn't do any of this because it was Cade all the way, and turns out it was Cade. So we're going to be starting off with Matas. If you guys want a specific prospect scouted next, let me know who you guys want in the comment section down below or over on Twitter. But let's go ahead and get started with this. So Matas Buzelis, we're going to go through and we're going to describe, give you his height, his weight, wingspan, all that stuff to start off. And then we'll get into his strengths and weaknesses. Then we'll wrap up with whether the Pistons should draft him or not. So Matas Buzelis, he is out of the G League Ignite. He did not go to college. He is out of the G League Ignite again. With the G League, played 1 season. He averaged 14 points a game, 6.6 rebounds, 1.9 assists. He had 2.1 blocks a game. He averaged more turnovers than assists, 2.1 turnovers. But this is the most important part, and we'll get into it later. He shot 44% from the field, 27% from deep on 3.4 attempts, and he shot 68% from the free throw line on 2.2 attempts. So that's his raw stat line from the G League Ignite. If I had to use one sentence to start off this entire deep dive into Matas, if I had to use one sentence to describe him, it would be he's a raw prospect with tools and a lot of potential, but has just as many questions. So we're going to start off with his strengths because he has strengths and he has weaknesses. And there's things to like about him, just like there's things not to like about him. So let's start off with his strengths. And I watched as much as I could. I gave it a week. We probably won't give every prospect a week because there's just so many we're going to have to get to. They'll probably only get a few days. But I watched Matas for a week, and this is why I came away with. So with his strengths, number 1, he has nice size. He is 6'8" and 3/4 without shoes, but with shoes, he was measured at 6'10" in the G League. He has a 6'10" wingspan. So he has not the greatest wingspan, but overall, being a 6'10" forward type of player, he has nice size for the type of player he is, which is a bigger forward with a nice handle. He does have a fine handle for someone his size, and he does showcase, if you watch him, every now and then he gives you that wow play with his handle. Every now and then he does a slick behind the back move. He'll give someone an in and out move. I was watching some tape this morning before we really finished up all this. He gave someone a nice hezzy fake jump shot and just dusted them and left them way behind and finished at the basket. So he has a nice handle for his size. A guy at 6'10" does have a nice handle. I wouldn't say he's like tremendous handle, but for his size, it's definitely usable, and he does make plays with it. Next thing that popped off the film for me is that watching him, I feel like he is a smart player. He's capable of making the right rotation defensively. He showcases that ability. He showcases the ability to know when to rotate at the rim and try and make plays on the defensive end of the floor. Offensively, off ball, he does keep the ball moving. He does seem like he has a sense of how to play within an offense. So there's that. I did come away thinking, I didn't watch this film and come away thinking, this is a guy who doesn't have that high of IQ. I do feel like he is relatively a smart basketball player. So that's another positive for him. We kind of mentioned this going back defensively. He is extremely active as a weak side rim protector, and he does make some crazy plays when it comes to blocking some shots. Now, when we get to his weaknesses, we'll come back to that. But he does make some crazy plays around the rim as a weak side rim protector. So that is something that he does really well defensively. At the combine, he did test with the 40-inch vertical. And I will say right now, defensively is where that pops up. You will see he makes some athletic plays defensively. Now, again, when we get to his weaknesses, we'll talk about offensively, but defensively, he showcases that bounce he has. And I've heard, talking to people and watching some videos, people are saying that he's a little bit more bouncier now. There was a video that came out of him practicing, and people are saying that he's a lot more athletic, or at least knows how to use the athleticism better, how to channel it better now than he did at the G League. So I'd get that, because again, he did test with a 40-inch vert. I was a little bit shocked that we didn't see it offensively as much, but again, we're going to save that for his weaknesses. At his size, with the handle he has, he also flashes that passing ability. If you remember, going back to last offseason with Brandon Miller, when we talked about Brandon Miller in our prospect episode, I said that he does showcase flashes of transition playmaking and the ability to make the right read playmaking-wise. It's the same thing with Matas. He doesn't do it consistently enough for me. He's not doing it all the time, but the passes he does make and some of the reads that he does make gives you a reason to believe that at 6'10", with the handle he has, he will be able to make passes at that size that will be incredible pluses to your offense. Do I think that he's going to be like running the offense? He's going to be like a point forward? No, that's not what it is. But do I see a future in where he's attacking closeouts, attacking gaps, and then making that cross-court skip pass to the corner? Can I see that happening? I can see that happening in his future. Can I see him coming off a DHO and making the right read off of that DHO? I can see that happening. That's something that I can see in his future. He does showcase some really nice passing, especially in transition off a life dribble. I didn't see it as much in the half court, but especially in transition, I thought in those few samples that he did have in transition off a life dribble, he did make some nice passes. And then we get to the shot making ability, which this is a bit of a positive and negative. And again, we'll get into this with his weaknesses. He makes a lot of tough shots. And when I say makes a lot of tough shots, I mean he makes a lot of tough shots. And by hearing that, you guys may know where we're going to go with that in about 10 minutes. But he makes a lot of tough shots. He is a tough shot maker for his size. And not even for his size, just overall, he's a tough shot maker. He didn't have a lot of sample on off the dribble mid-range shots, but according to what I found, he shot 47.4% on off the dribble mid-range shots, which is pretty good. It just was not on a lot of attempts. It was 1.1 attempts. So whether you want to read into that too much, however, that's for you to read into. But he did flash that versatile scoring ability, let's say. He flashed the ability to get to the basket at times. He flashed the ability to hit some floaters. He flashed the ability to hit some difficult off-the-dribble mid-range shots. And every now and then, he also did flash the ability to hit some off-the-dribble threes, some step-back threes, some sidestep threes. He takes a lot of tough shots, and therefore, he makes a lot of tough shots. So that is something that I can understand someone looking at him and being like, okay, 6'10", nice athleticism, I'd say, after the combine. Again, we'll get into that a little later. Has a nice handle for his size, does make some nice passes every now and then, and also is able to make some tough shots. I can see how you see a future where he's a really, really good basketball player. And lastly, to wrap up his strengths, again, like I said, he routinely, I felt like, flashed the ability to attack closeouts. And again, his versatility as a shot maker, I think, is what sells people the most. I don't know. I have to say it again, because again, it's like, it's probably to me, watching his film, this was like my biggest takeaway from him, which is why I have to say it like 100 times. He is a tough shot maker. It felt like every shot he made was a tough shot. So credit to him to be able to be a tough shot maker, but we'll get into, the other side of that in a few minutes. Now, it's hard to talk about this aspect without also talking about the negative, but he shot 27% from three in college, or not in college, in the G League. I'm sorry. That's not good at all. However, there seems to be a lot of belief amongst people I've talked with that he is going to be a better shooter. And he even talked about it last week. He said he's a much better shooter than the numbers suggest. Talked about how his legs just weren't ready for the G League season. If you go back to his high school career, he shot 43% from three. So whether you want to read into the high school numbers or not, there's a level of belief from people I've talked to that he will be a better shooter than the numbers suggest, but he did not shoot well at all at G League, in the G League. But again, going back to high school, he did shoot really well from three, which I am going to take with some, legitimacy, because if you remember, again, going back to Brandon Miller last year, we have Rafael Barlow, Locked On's very own, on the podcast, and he told me, go back and watch Brandon Miller in high school. He did a lot of off-the-dribble mid-range stuff. Because remember, that was a big concern of mine, because I just didn't see it at all in college from him. And Rafael was like, hey, look, he did it in high school. He just wasn't asked to do it in college. I'm telling you, go look at high school. And at that point, I'm sitting there like, look, this is my second year doing draft stuff. I'm like, why should I care about what he's doing in high school? That's not the same comp, whatever. And now we see him in Charlotte. And I feel like you saw a bit of that stuff that Rafael was mentioning. So take it for however much you want. I just know that he did not shoot well this past year in G League. His form doesn't look bad. Like I can see the future where like that form generates, like he ends up shooting well, but the sample size didn't do him justice. I just know there's people that believe in it because of his high school 3-point percentage, because of the shots he does make, and because the form isn't bad. So that wraps up all the strengths and positives for me with Matas. If there were some strengths and positives that you guys have from Matas watching him that I didn't mention, let me know in the comment section down below or over on Twitter at Kuka Hill. When we come back, we'll talk about his weaknesses and his negatives and reasons why, the Pistons maybe shouldn't draft him. We'll talk about that when we come back. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every playoff shot count. And like I've told you guys this many, many times before, a few years ago when betting became legal in Michigan, I didn't know where to go. I didn't know what app to try. I didn't know anything about it. I downloaded FanDuel, and I have not turned back since. It's super self-explanatory, a lot of fun, all kinds of things to do on there. And again, the best thing for me was it's super easy to use. So again, visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. That's what FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. Free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to us on. That's another great way to support the podcast. So we talked about Matas' strengths. His size, his ability to handle at that size, some of the passes he does make, his ability to routinely show that he can attack closeouts and make some shots off closeouts, his tough shot making ability, his potential versatility as a shot maker within the half court offense. We talked about all of that with him. Now it's time to get into his weaknesses. And by far, number one, like at the very top of the list of his weaknesses, and then you have to literally skip bullet points until you get to number 2. That's not to say he doesn't have other weaknesses, but this is so far and away the number one weakness for me. It's crazy. His strength. His strength, his strength, his strength. He is 6'8" 3/4 without shoes, but 6'10" with shoes on. At least that's what he was measured at G League. He is 197 pounds. He weighed in at the combine. 197 pounds. He is not strong at all. And when you watch him play, when you watch his film, it pops. And when I say it pops, it absolutely just like stares you straight in the face when you're watching him play. And this is why, let's go this route, because there's going to be a lot of things we're going to talk about here. But let's go this route. This is why I want to start off with his strength. Then one of the reasons why the strength is such a big issue is because he is not explosive off the dribble. He's not going to be beating players off the dribble defensively in the half court because of his first step is so crazy, or that, he's such a fast player that he's just zooming around. Like, that's not what's going to happen. He oftentimes cannot do that. He is not that explosive of a player off the dribble at all. He's just not, which is fine. You don't have to be a crazy first step person, especially at his size. Instead, someone at his size with his handle usually becomes a strength creator. And what that is someone who creates space for themselves on drives to the rim or step backs, whatever, by using their strength. They're going to, bump people off their spot. They're going to use their strength to generate separation. And he can't do that. He flatly cannot do that. He is not strong at all. And that's the first thing that jumped off the page for me is that, okay, he's not beating people off the dribble with his explosion, which is fine. I recognize that. That's fine. He doesn't need to do that. So then I started watching, okay, is he able to bump people off their spot to create room for himself? And he just is not. He's just not able to. And that's going to be, I think, by far his biggest hindrance in the NBA is how the lack of strength that he has. Because he's not an explosive athlete, the lack of strength he has is really, really going to hurt him on the offensive end and the defensive end. On both ends of the floor, when you watch him, he gets bumped off his spot routinely because he doesn't have a lot of strength. So that's the biggest problem for me. That's the biggest negative by far for me is within the half court, he's not beating people off the dribble with his explosion, and he's also not able to be a strength creator because he's just not strong. He's skinny as ever. He's very, very skinny. So that's the first weakness I have. He has to absolutely put on strength. And then the question becomes, well, just how much weight can he put on? How much strength can he put on? Everyone always says, put strength on, put weight on. But some players have a max of how much they can put on. You have the Giannis's that are able to just completely transform their bodies. And then you have the Pokus. And like you have other players like, you don't know. So that's the first question I have by far with him. Now let's go back to the tough shots. He is a good tough shot maker. But that's because all of the shots he takes are tough shots. Like that is the bad part about it. He does not create easy shots for himself, like at all, at least to me. From everything I watched, I rarely ever saw him get himself an easy bucket. Like outside of like an easy fast break layup or, an easy putback or something. Like within the half court, I felt like almost every bucket I watched him score was an absolutely tough shot. Like it was like, oh my God, that was tough. And is it good to be a tough shot maker? Yeah, that's a good skill to have. But to rely on making tough shots is not a recipe for success. And especially when you're talking to someone like me, I'll admit my bias with this. It is what it is, man. I'll admit my bias here. Killian Hayes was a tough shot maker. I will not get burnt like this again. Like I will not get burnt like this again. When I say he's a tough shot maker, it does not mean that I thought Killian Hayes was a great tough shot maker. It means every shot he took was a tough shot, and he relied on a tough shot diet. And obviously, I got burnt with that one. So I will not get burnt like that. I'm probably going to have some bias with that for a while because I will not get burnt on a player like that again. It just is what it is. Now, obviously, there's some joking with that. Matas is not the same. There's things to like about Matas that Killian obviously didn't have. Like, it was a joke somewhat, so don't take me too serious, everybody. But again, he takes a lot of tough shots. He doesn't create a lot of easy looks for himself. So that's one of the issues I had with him offensively. Defensively, while he shows the understanding of he makes rotations and you see that he knows he should be making rotations, there are also often times when he gets caught in no man's land. Or, like I mentioned at the beginning when I said stay tuned for that, keep that part in mind, by him blocking shots around the rim, there's often times when he'll just go try to block a shot around the rim where one, is not his rotation and he leaves his guy wide open in the corner for no reason, trying to make a highlight play. Or two, he's going after a shot he has no chance at. And it puts his team in a bad situation. So his defense is on off. It's wishy-washy. He shows the ability to make plays to where you would be able to. If someone were to come up to me and say, I can see Montas being a good defender in the long run, you see enough with his IQ wise and his ability to make some plays around the rim where I'd believe it. But I think he's still far away from that. I don't, especially because of his strength. Again, going back to that. This combined with his strength, I just think he's a long ways away from that. So that's the other thing. I guess if we can stay with the strength part, it hurts him when guarding even guards. Even when he's defending guards, who's a guard okay, let's just say Scoot Henderson. You see how built Scoot is. That's a body type like that. Even a body type like that for a guy that's 6'2", 6'3", is able to completely bump him off his spot because of his lack of strength. So that's the problem that's popped off film for me defensively. Now, this part, I don't have his actual measurements. I wasn't able to find it. But I'm just going to make this guess because of what I saw on film. He has to have small hands. Absolutely has to have small hands. Because there was multiple times where he would just fumble a catch, he would fumble a rebound, or there would be times where he would just lose his handle without like anyone really like reaching in or anything. He just like would lose it. And for those of you guys who played basketball or at least been around basketball, a lot of that is due to like your hand size. If you have smaller hands, it's harder to do so. When you have bigger hands, that's why people care about that stuff. If you have bigger hands, you can palm the ball. It basically feels like you're palming it with your dribble, like all that stuff. So, and obviously it makes it easier to catch the ball, whatever. So on film, he fumbled the ball a lot and he lost the ball a lot. Just randomly, not because of a defender doing something. He would just fumble it, which tells me he has small hands or he has bad hands. Either one, or at least questionable hands. Maybe let me not say bad, but questionable ones. I was even watching some film this morning where he caught an alley-oop. It should have been an easy alley-oop, but as he went to dunk it, he lost grip of it and went flying to the sideline. That comes from not being able to have great grip on the ball because your hands are not big. So I don't know what his exact measurements are, but the film tells me he does not have great small or big hands, I should say. Again, next thing, he was not a good three-point shooter this past year. He just wasn't. Now, again, he shot extraordinarily well in high school, and there seems to be a belief amongst the draft community that he will be a better shooter. From the people I've talked to, that he will be a better shooter than he showed this past year. He came out and said, I'm a better shooter than the numbers suggest. He attributed it to his legs just not being where it needed to be for this past season in the G League. And also, there's a lot of people who watched the G League entire season that say he didn't have the greatest situation with how the team was built and all that. So take that. Look, you can take all that into case, and maybe he becomes a good three-point shooter. That's completely on the board. But he was not a good three-point shooter this past year, and he also was not a good free throw shooter this past year. He was 68%, which is concerning to me. The next thing, he does not have the greatest touch around the rim. He shows some touch on floaters. He shows some touch on some hook shots in like that in-between area, and he does show some touch on his mid-range off the dribble shots. When he gets closer around the rim, I watch him take those hook shots and all those other shots. I'm like, okay, he has some fine touch. And then I'd watch him get to around the rim, and it felt like his touch was like just flat out bad. And maybe that's partly because he's not able to create a lot of separation, so he's forcing a lot of stuff because he's just not strong. I think a lot of that has to do with that. So him getting stronger may help with a lot of that. And then another part of it is, remember how I said he has a 40-inch vert at the combine? It showcased itself defensively. Offensively, it did not show itself to me a lot. Again, people are saying he's a better athlete now than he was during the season, but watching him, it popped defensively. Offensively, there was a lot to be desired to me going in knowing that this guy just had a 40-inch vert. If you told me that and then I went and watched it, I would not have guessed that he did at all because it just didn't pop like that offensively. I think his touch, his strength, which probably should be one, his strength, his touch, and his ability to channel the athleticism around the rim, I think really impacted his finishing. And it just was not great. It wasn't great. And then to wrap it up, I'm not going to lie to you. Maybe this is just me. At times, I just feel like he's just straight up clumsy. There's a lot of times where I feel like he's just falling over himself at times. He'll just fall, like he'll trip over his own feet. Maybe I'm looking too much into it, but to me, watching him, I felt like coming away, he's just a little too clumsy. There's times where I'm just like, what happened? So that's the negatives that I have written down. His weaknesses so far, based off the film I watched. So if there's anything else that I didn't point out that you guys also feel, let me know in the comment section down below. If you guys feel like I got something wrong or I'm offering something, again, let me know in the comment section down below or over on Twitter at Kuka Hill. When we come back, now we'll talk about, should the Pistons draft him? What's the argument for and what's the argument against? We'll talk about that when we come back. PrizePicks is America's #1 fantasy sports app with more than 3 million members. It is the easiest, most exciting way to get in on the action while you watch your favorite sports and players. You just pick more or less on 2 or more player stats and watch the winnings roll in. Get in on the playoff action and win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks as you and the world's best players take the game to a new level during basketball's postseason. You can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000 with basketball, hockey, college basketball entries today on PrizePicks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. And my favorite thing about PrizePicks is, let's say you have an NBA player in one of your entries that gets hurt in the first half, doesn't return the second half. Everywhere else, you're screwed. With PrizePicks, that player is automatically rebooted. It's an absolute game changer, and it's why I love PrizePicks so much. So download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy with PrizePicks. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We're free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. So this is what we're going to do. Through the mock drafts that I've seen, now everywhere doesn't have a mock draft yet. So I don't have like 20 different mock drafts, but the Ringer, they have them going 5th to the Pistons. Tankathon has them going 5th to the Pistons. NBA.com, they have them going 5th to the Pistons. Some of the comps I saw from the Ringer and from Tankathon, NBA, some of the other articles I've read, 2 of the ones I saw were Lamar Odom and Hedo Turkoglu. Makes sense to me. My future role for what he would be on the Pistons would be the starting 3 or 4 next to Caden Nassar. What would his rotation fit be as of right now this season? Not sure. He could go from being a high minutes getter to just not being in the rotation at all and being in their G League team. That's how the range is. I'm not sure what his rotation fit would be. And I don't think he would impact the roster decisions in the short term. Long term, yes. But short term, I don't think he would impact their decision making this year. So with that said, now I know that we went through his weaknesses. I'm sure it probably felt like I went through a lot of his weaknesses. And I did. But what's the argument for the Pistons to take him? Now listen, Matas might have the most potential, the highest ceiling of any player available for the Pistons at 5. If they keep the pick. You can't teach his size, and at his size, the handle that he has is legit. The flashing of playmaking he showcases is legit. His tough shot making is legit. And if you believe, I think this is probably his biggest swing set. When I say swing set, I should have said swing skill set. It's his 3-point shooting. Because if you believe his 3-point shooting's there, if you think he's closer to what he was in high school and what there seems to be a belief in the community he is and what he believes, then you have yourself a stretch 4, maybe a 3 if you want to put him at the 3 and Nassar at the 2. I think he'd be a 4, but you have a stretch 4 next to Caden Nassar, who is capable of hitting outside shots, hitting tough outside shots, creating a little bit off the dribble when attacking closeouts, hitting off the dribble middies, getting to the rim and hitting floaters. A decently athletic player and someone who's able to keep the ball moving. That is a really viable player. But that really comes down to, do you believe his 3-point shot is closer to what it was in high school? Or is it as bad as it was in the G League his one season? That's his biggest swing skill set. Because if it's what it was in the G League, I'm not going to use bust. You know what? I'm not going to use that. If he is closer to what he was in the G League, he will not be worth where he's selected. If he is closer to where he was in the high school, that changes everything. That would change a lot of things. And now defenders are having to respect his closeouts. Now he's able to use that handle to really get downhill. He doesn't have to be explosive because guys are going to be off. The defense is going to be off because they're having to put so much attention on his closeouts, on his hitting a 3. So that changes literally everything for him if he's able to hit the 3 shot. And him putting on strength, I think, solves a lot of his weaknesses. However, the question is, how much strength can he put on, and how long will it take for him to put strength on? That's the question. I do think strength would solve a lot of his finishing abilities. I think his strength would solve a lot of his tough shots that he has to take. I think a lot of those tough shots would turn into easier shots if he was stronger. I think if he was stronger, it would help him defensively. I think probably 80% of his weaknesses, I think the root of it is strength. Him being skinny and not being strong. Because he has a lot of skills. He has a lot of raw skills. But his strength is holding him back in a lot of regards, I think. So he has, I think, I would feel comfortable saying, I haven't gotten to everyone else, but I've heard people say this and I can see it. If someone tells me he has the most potential and highest ceiling of anyone there at 5, I can see that. I would not disagree with that right now. I can see why people would say that. He has a lot of skills. And if he develops on his raw skill set and he just gets stronger, there's a base player there that is really valuable. I can see that. So that's why the Pistons would draft him. Oh, also, if the Pistons are not, this is a key part. I don't know why I forgot this. If the Pistons are not as much worried about this year and are still looking at the long term and looking for the home run swing of 3 years from now, Matas would make sense, I think. That's where he would make sense to me. If you're looking at if they're on under as much pressure as it's been reported, and people like myself are saying they are, I think Matas would be risky. So that's why they would take him. Why they shouldn't take him. Like I just said, I don't think he's ready to contribute right now. I can't see a future where he's ready to contribute right now to winning. I just cannot see that. Even if he comes to the NBA and he's shooting like 35, 36% from three, I struggle to see him being able to contribute instantly. And for most teams that at the top of the lottery, that should not hurt him. That should not hurt his draft status. However, like I said, there's a pretty good chance the Pistons just trade the pick because of how much pressure they're under. If they keep the pick, I wonder, do they feel enough pressure to where that would scare them away from even taking the chance on Matas? So that's that. Next thing, obviously, like I said, he's incredibly skinny and has no strength. Does not have a lot of strength. So do you believe after working with him, after having him in for a workout, after, getting the medicals, whatever, do you feel like with your training staff and with your team, do you feel like that he can put strength on, and do you feel comfortable and confident that you can help him put strength on? If you do, okay. If not, that's a deal breaker for me. Like, it's an absolute deal breaker. You need to feel confident 100% that your team will be able to develop his body. If not, stay away. Like, absolutely stay away. That's how I feel about it. And then lastly, and this is more from Matas' perspective, because I'm going to do this with every player, because all of us want the Pistons to do well, okay? Like, whether or not people want to consider me a fan or not, at the end of the day, I would like to see the Pistons do well. Like, at the end of the day, if I had, like, I'd like to see the Pistons do well. However, from the player's perspective, Matas needs, in my opinion, a franchise that's going to be patient with him, that's going to develop him, have his development at the top of the, maybe not make him the 180 team, but his development should be at the top of the list. You should care very much about his development. You should put a lot of time into very carefully developing him and not pushing him too fast, not rushing him too fast, and bringing him along how he should. Because there is a really good player in there. It just will take a franchise that has that patience and that development team to not only develop, again, his skills, his raw skills that he has, but his body. And I don't think the Pistons are that team. I don't know if they have the time to do so. I think they're under a lot of pressure. And if you go over the last 15 years, I don't trust the development team. I don't know how anyone could trust the development team. So with a player that I believe that has a lot of skills and has a lot of potential, but needs a lot of development to get there, I don't know if the Pistons are the best match for him. However, I see the potential. I see the ceiling. I get why people like him. And if the Pistons do draft him, I will see the vision for it. I'll just have to hope the Pistons develop him correctly and they give him that time he needs. Because if not, if they try to rush him and throw him into the fire, I don't think that will work well. And if they don't develop his body correctly, if they don't develop his raw skills correctly from where they are right now, I think it could flame out fast for him. And it would be bad for him. I think that's the kind of, how people always talk about, you hear players and pundits say, it doesn't matter where you get drafted. It matters who you get drafted to. I think this is a prime example of that to me, in my opinion. So that's where I'm at with Matas Buzelis. Let me know where you guys stand with Matas in the comment section down below or over on Twitter at Kuka Hill. That's all I've got for you guys today. Thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. Free and available on our podcast platforms. Hit that subscribe button to the YouTube channel. Leave us a 5-star review, whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. And until next time, I'll see you guys later. Stay safe out there. Until next time, peace out.